Hey everyone, and welcome back to Jeff and Joe's Puerto Rican Kitchen, where we show you how to make easy, authentic Puerto Rican recipes. It's day 9 of our quarantine series, and I'm super excited about today's show. Rather than making a new recipe, I'm going to go back to the first recipe we ever made on this show and really dig into it. I'm going to talk about white rice. White rice, you think, wow, that's pretty basic. You know, I've made white rice many different ways, and I've made white rice with many different people, and each one of those people cook it a little bit different, and they swear by their rules. Every abuela has the 10 steps to make the perfect white rice, and if you don't follow those 10 steps, your rice is going to be terrible. It's going to be amobollado, it's going to be too dry, it's going to be too salty, it's going to be too oily, you name it. You got to follow those 10 rules. But the trick is that everybody has slightly different 10 rules. And which ones are the right ones? Do they make a difference? Does it matter? Who knows? But that's what we're going to try to find out today. I've seen some different rules from different people, and I want to go in and test a couple. So let's give it a shot. Who knows what we'll figure out? This is going to be Jeff and Joe's Puerto Rican Kitchen Mythbusters version. Let's get cooking. We're making white rice, so our ingredients are pretty straightforward. I've got some medium grain rice. I got 20 pounds of it because we're going to go through a lot of it. I got some corn oil, I got some salt, and obviously we'll be using water as well. Now, in addition to the ingredients, I want to talk a little bit about the setup here. I've got 2 identical calderos. They're bought at the same place, they're the same size, they appear to be in the same condition. I'm going to treat them as if they're identical. And what we're going to do is that we're going to run 2 batches of rice side by side, in which we alter one thing in one and leave it in the other, and just to see if we can tell the difference. Now, there's a couple rules that I've thought about doing, but I want to focus on 3 things today. First, I want to see if washing the rice makes a difference. I know a lot of people wash their rice. We wash our rice on this channel. I've always washed my rice, but I've never really thought what would happen if you don't wash it. So we're going to try that. We're going to wash one, and then we're not going to wash the other. The second thing I want to test is whether or not it matters if you leave the lid on during the cooking period. Now, typically with white rice, there's a first period of cooking where you're boiling it on high, and then you put on the lid and then cook it at low for another period of time. When I was growing up, everybody around me swore by the fact that if you took off that lid during the second period, your rice was going to be messed up. But when I started dating my wife and cooking with her family, they would take it off all the time and like move it around, and I was like, what are you guys doing? It's like, you're ruining the rice. But their rice seemed to turn out, so I want to see, like, does it actually make a difference? So does leaving the top on during the second cooking period actually make a difference? And then finally, I'm going to run one series in which we just have less water than regular in one pot and more water than regular in the other pot, just to see what varying the amount of water will do to the recipes. Okay, first things first. I know we want to get into testing our ideas, but first we need to make sure that we got a good baseline. Now, we have identical pots, but as you can see, they're not on identical burners. So I wanted to make sure that the burners themselves are actually putting out the same amount of heat, because otherwise, like, you're going to see variance there. So we're going to actually go ahead and cook our baseline rice in both of them, just to make sure we get the same side by side. And so, you know, we did this in our earlier video. The rice recipe is pretty straightforward. It's 2 pounds of rice. We're going to wash that. Then it's going to be 2 tablespoons of oil, 2 teaspoons of salt, and then 5 cups of water. And so we're going to do that. We're going to do that in both of these just to make sure that we get the same outcome. So let's go do that. I want to weigh my rice just because it gives me a little more precision than measuring it by volume. With my scale, I can make sure the rice is consistent down to 1/10 of an ounce. nothing really special about the washing. We've done this before, so I won't go into detail about it. Just rinse the rice with cold water and then use your hands to agitate the rice, trying to scrape off any excess starch. After washing the rice, I'm going to reweigh it just to see how much water the rice absorbed during the washing. Now we'll weigh our water as well. A cup of water weighs 8 ounces, so we need a total of 2 pounds and 8 ounces. There, we got all of our ingredients measured out now. We got 2 pounds of rice washed, 2 pounds of rice washed, then 5 cups or 2 pounds 8 ounces of water, 2 pounds 8 ounces, 2 pounds 8 ounces of water, then we got the corn oil, and we got the salt. So we got the ingredients already, they're the same. They're gonna go into the 2 pots separately. We're gonna see how it turns out. For the cooking methodology, again, what we've used before is that you cook it on high with the water and the oil and the salt. Once that comes to a boil, you add in the rice and cook on high for 6.5 minutes. Then after those 6.5 minutes, you're gonna put the tops back on and turn it down to low and let it go another 20 minutes. I know this is just one way. Again, a lot of people kind of cook al ojo or just kind of like by watching. I do that from time to time, but just for the fact of being able to reproduce it, I want to keep everything kind of as systematic as possible again. So bring the water, oil, and salt to a boil, cook on high for 6.5 minutes, put the top on, then leave it at low for 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we're going to see how they turn out. Okay, great first baseline. Things went as well as planned. The recipe worked. Always a little bit of a nerve-wracking thing. So this is the first one. This is what we're gonna call side A. It's on my left, it's A. Rice is good, fully cooked. You can see that the grains don't stick together. Then side B. Same thing, it's well cooked, grains don't stick together. So no real notable differences between the two, which is great. That shows us that the pots and the stoves are working the same. And so now we're all ready to go. Don't worry, we're gonna switch this out, and then I'm going to get all of the new stuff and we'll be ready to go. Okay, now that we've tested our basic methodology, it's on to our first test. This first test, I want to see whether washing your rice actually makes a difference. Everybody I know swears by the fact that you need to wash your rice. But I've never tried it without washing it, so I don't know. So the general thinking is that there's a lot of loose starches on the rice. That's the white powder that you kind of get when you touch it. When the rice is dry, it's got this like white powder. And so the thinking is that that white powder then combines with the water to create kind of a sticky glue, so you get gummy rice in the end. So if we cook a rice that hasn't been washed, we expect it to come out a little bit gummier than the rice that has been. But let's go ahead and see if that's true. So I've got it set up. We've got another 2 pounds of rice that have been washed, just like before. Then we have 2 pounds of rice that haven't been washed. All right, so these are the same. And then we got the water. The water is slightly different though, because if you remember when we washed the rice and then we re-weighed it, it added about 3 ounces, and those 3 ounces are coming from water. So we have 2 pounds, 8 ounces, same as before with the washed rice, but for the dry rice, we have 2 pounds, 11 ounces. So we added that water that the rice gathered from the washing back into the regular water. That way we keep the water between the two the same, and we know that that's not making the difference, it's actually the washing. And so with that, we're gonna put the washed rice in A, we're gonna put the regular unwashed rice in B. We're gonna do the same thing, cook it for 6.5 minutes on high, put the tops on, cook it for another 20 minutes, and then we're gonna see what happens. So let's go throw it all in. Okay, there we go. We've got our rice that we didn't wash versus the control, which is just the base rice that we did wash. So let's get a little bit of both and give it a try. I got my washed rice and my unwashed rice. Right off the bat, I just want to say that I'm surprised how similar they turned out. There's no clumping in the unwashed rice. I mean, it's just as granulated. It didn't stick. This is the unwashed. It's a little stickier, I'll give it that. The unwashed rice has a different mouthfeel to it. But honestly, it's almost better. It has a lot more flavor. It tastes a lot more like rice in a very strange way. The washed rice definitely has a cleaner grain to it, and it kind of falls apart in your mouth, whereas the unwashed rice is still a little sticky in there. But honestly, I think I prefer the unwashed. You know, maybe what happens is that if you don't adjust for that small amount of water, that you get a different outcome. But you know, assuming that you adjust for the water that you would add in the washing, yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So, unwashed rice it is. Okay guys, well I'm still a little shook by that outcome. Very, very surprised that the washing, if anything, made it less tasty in my mind. Really interesting, but on to the next one. The next thing I want to test is whether or not taking off the lid during the second phase of the cooking matters. Now when I was a kid, this was hammered into me by everybody I cooked with. You can't touch the lid while it's cooking. Nobody had a great explanation of why, but it was something about the heat and just not keeping all the steam in. Who knows? So we're gonna try that. And so we're back to the base recipe. I said we're gonna keep that kind of throughout, so that's what we're doing. We got 2 pounds of dried of washed rice. So the same thing with the 2 pounds, 8 ounces of water. We'll do the oil and the salt. It'll be the same thing. And then we'll cook it on high for the same. But then during the second phase, the 20-minute period, for pot B, I'm gonna check it every 5 minutes and give it a little stir. And we're gonna see what happens. So let's go, let's get it done. Alright, here are our next two sets of rices. We have our control again, and then we have this batch of rice that we kind of stirred and moved every 5 minutes during the second period. So again, we'll try them side by side and see if we can tell a difference. Just from looking at them, this one seems to be a little bit more clumped up. And you notice a lot more broken grains, but let's try it. So control, just to remind us. So it's definitely a little bit more al dente. You can taste you can feel the grain centers have a little bit more, not crunch, they're still cooked, but they're just a little denser. So, that kind of makes sense where every time you open it, you're losing a lot of heat, you're losing a lot of steam, moisture, and so maybe you're just not cooking it as well. It's a minor difference, and I wouldn't say it's bad or unpleasant. Otherwise, the grains fall apart, it's similar. Honestly, I think it's a small difference. I wouldn't rate it as being unpleasant. It definitely feels like it's just a little bit undercooked, but I imagine if you leave it on the stove a couple more minutes, it would resolve it. But really, there's no benefit to it, so you could save yourself like every couple of minutes having to come back and do it, and there's no real difference. So I would take the original over kind of the extra stirring. Don't see any benefits, and it's more work and slightly more al dente. All right. On to the next test. Okay, great. So far we've learned a ton. We've learned that washing your rice, doesn't make that big of a difference. I think I actually prefer it not washed. Second, we learned that if you want to take off the top during the second part of the cooking, feel free, go right ahead. No benefit and a marginal downside, but if you want to do it, you can do it. I think the real takeaway here is that rice has been very resilient. We haven't been able to mess it up, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna do it this time. The one thing that everybody swears by is the important thing when making rice is getting the ratio between rice and water right. And so far we've been keeping that consistent, right? We've been doing 2 pounds of rice to 5 cups of water, and that's been working great for us. But this time, we're gonna mess that up on purpose. So we have rice, again, 2 pounds of washed rice. Then for pot A, we're gonna go with 4 cups of water. So we're gonna reduce it by 20%. And for pot B, we're gonna go with 6 cups of water. So we're gonna increase it by 20%. So let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Who knows, maybe it just won't matter either. We'll see. Okay, there we go. We've got our last experiment of rice. So the rice with less water, 20% less water. You can see that it's falls apart easily. I feel like it's going to be a little undercooked. And then we got the 20% more water. You can already see that it kind of clumps together. It's really, really sticky. Let's give it a try. So less water. Actually not that bad. It's a little al dente, but not unpleasantly. I'd eat that. Then more water. Yeah, definitely not a fan of that. The grains kind of fall apart or clump together in your mouth. It's not inedible. Wouldn't love to serve that, but it's not horrible. So that's the upside. I'm actually pretty surprised by this one. I thought the less water was going to be really undercooked and still kind of like almost crunchy. But it was noticeably more al dente, but not in a bad way. The overcooking with the water, the extra water one, not my favorite. It's hard to describe, but the grains are just kind of like clumpy and they don't have a lot of texture other than just kind of like raw carb. So I'd rather not serve that, but also, right, like 20% more or less water doesn't make that big of a difference in the end. That's a pretty wide margin. And so, you know, I think the big takeaway here is that rice is really forgiving. And so going back to the idea about there being kind of 10 rules of thumb of how to do it or not to do it, I don't know. It seems that you can break a lot of those rules and you get slightly different outcomes, but not necessarily bad outcomes. And honestly, I don't think most people would notice it. I think if you went too much farther with the water on this one, it might get unsalvageable. And at some point, I have to imagine that if you take the water down low enough, like it'll just be kind of raw. But so far, we haven't pushed the limits. Who knows where we will. And so again, just to recap, so we did one with washing, no washing. I liked the no wash actually better. That it was a little bit tastier and there's just kind of like a mouthfeel that I liked. Then there was the lid on permanently or kind of like checking it. Not a huge difference there. Probably no benefit to mixing it every once in a while, so easier just to leave the lid on. And then finally, 20% more water or 20% less water. Not a big difference. If you're gonna err on a side, I would err on the less water. I think the less water was more passable as good rice than the extra water. The extra water was definitely like, it was obvious that you messed it up. So, you know, that's something to think about when you're making rice. Maybe if you got a question about more water, less water, maybe err on the less water. And if you noticed in the first video, I stuck the spoon in it and it kind of like stayed upright. That's like a real kind of like classic way to tell if the right amount of water is there. And so that would seem to be kind of in the middle, and maybe a little bit more, a little bit less isn't gonna hurt it too much, but you would rather stay under it than over it. So guys, I hope you liked this video. It's been a blast making it. I think I've been shooting this for almost 6 hours now, with just rice after rice after rice. Don't worry, rice isn't gonna go to waste. We got people to eat it. So you can rest assured that that's fine. And then yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know about your experiences with rice. I'd love to hear about kind of either things that you kind of like are think are just the way to do that, and maybe we can do a follow-on and see what other types of rice rules that we can test and see if they're right or not. So thanks again, guys. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode.